that button. Okay, just kidding. We're starting now. Starting that process over. Hello, welcome everybody. We are actually live on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube right now. Super excited. I am Emily Clark. I am the Climb Communications Manager here at PSI. And I am joined today by my co-host, Courtney Key Williams, also known as Corey, our creative strategist at the Climb. We are here with some amazing Climb leaders who volunteered their time with us today to talk about their experiences with pumping. So I see that there's 3 people live on Facebook. So hi, thanks for joining us. We're so glad you're here. We're just going to start by kind of telling you all a little bit about ourselves. I am Emily Clark, like I just said, and I'm here in Oklahoma. I have been married to my husband, Daniel, for 19 years, and we have twin girls who are almost 10. I can't even believe that's happening. They're already planning their roller skating squishmallow party for April. I do think we might have just lost a Climb leader, but hopefully she can come back on for us. So again, we're just going to do introductions and then we'll jump right into our questions for today.
I'll take over and introduce myself then. I'm Corey. I'm the creative strategist at the Climb. I'm in Missouri, Kansas City specifically. I am a mama of 4. I have a teenager, a preteen, and a set of twin toddler boys who keep me very busy. I've worn many hats, educator, therapist, as far as the ABA world goes. I've been a foster care case manager and then a volunteer at PSI and now working here in the Climb office as well. So did I forget anything else that's important? I don't feel like I did, but
I forgot my pronouns. She, her.
She, her. I have them listed.
Yeah. Yes. I think you got everything.
Somebody else, go
ahead. Jana, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Sure. I'm Jana Harchin. I am a licensed psychologist in New Jersey and PA. I am a mom of a 14-month-old, and I am the leader of Team Burlington Camden, New Jersey. And I am a survivor of postpartum depression and anxiety, predominantly because of my feeding experience. So that's me. And she, her pronouns.
Thank you for sharing. Michelle, you're up.
Sure. I'm Michelle Margiotis, she, her. I'm the Climb leader, one of the Climb leaders for Team Berkeley Heights, and I have a 19-month-old little boy, so about 1.5 years.
Thank you. Charlotte?
Hi, I'm Charlotte Ramberg, she, her also. I lead the Climb in Cumming, Georgia. I have 2 kids of my own with my husband. They're 6 and 4. And I'm also currently 28 weeks pregnant with my second surrogacy baby. So
that's wonderful.
I'm hoping I can make it through this without having to get up to be.
Wow.
But yeah, so I'm an LPC as well. That's kind of how I got into this field. I am a PMHC, and I volunteered with the Climb for now 3-4 years, and I'm also a specialized coordinator for gestational carriers and intended parents.
Wow, that's so cool. I feel like we're gonna have to have a whole nother conversation about surrogacy because that is really cool and fascinating. Thank you so much for doing that. Let's see, Courtney, you are next.
Hi, I'm Courtney Roy. I live in Central Maine. This will be my 3rd year of leading the Climb for Team Central Maine. Yay. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a PSI support coordinator. And I have 2 boys. One will be 7 in June, and my other son will be a year next month.
Oh, thank you. My children are literally making smoothies right now, so I apologize if there's background noise. Hopefully this system is working. I'm like, okay. Liz, you are up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liz. I go by she, her. I am a co-leader of Team East Bay in the greater San Francisco area of California. By trade, I've been a nurse in the operating room for the last 14 years. I started volunteering with PSI with the climb last year, and this year I'll be helping with co-facilitating a support group as I'm a survivor of psychosis, postpartum anxiety, and depression. I do have a 3.5-year-old. She is
Aw.
our IVF PGD miracle.
Wonderful.
And I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And last but not least, Erin.
Hi, my name is Erin Smith, she, her. I'm a co-leader of Team Bergen in New Jersey. I have 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy, 11, 8, and 3. And I am a social worker in private practice and a PMHC in Jersey. And I, too, am a survivor of PMADS, primarily due to pumping and failed breastfeeding. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to this. So thank you.
Yeah, very relatable. Very, very relatable. Jana, I don't remember. Did you happen to mention your climb team? Because I forgot to.
Yes. So Team Burlington, Camden, New Jersey.
Very good. So some of our audience might have noticed that about half of our wonderful climb leaders are from New Jersey. So I thought that was pretty cool because I put out a call to climb leaders, anyone who had experiences with pumping that wanted to do this live today, and Jersey showed up. So way to go. Jersey is a small state with big heart. So we are so glad that each of you are here today. And I believe, do I have the first question or do you have the first question, Corey? Corey does. No, I do. Okay. Yeah, it's me. Okay, so we're just going to kind of go around and have a conversation about pumping, obviously. So we're going to start with a basic question of why did you choose to pump? Jana, will you go first, please?
I wanted support. I knew that I wanted to nurse, pump for support, and then when or if I wanted to or needed to use formula, I would resort to that. I had no idea that it would be so complicated learning how to nurse and pump. So I ended up trying all 3 of those at the beginning of my journey and being an exclusive pumper for most of my journey.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. I know with twins, I immediately was also trying to learn how to breastfeed and pump and providing formula to both of my girls. And one was in the NICU. And so they sent my pumping, down to her. But some of you have already talked about the relationship between your PMADs, your perinatal mental health complications, and breastfeeding. And that definitely was the case for me as well. Michelle, would you like to tell us why you chose to pump?
Sure. So it was essentially throughout the entire pregnancy, I kind of kept control about what I was putting into my body and in order to give the right nutrients to the baby. So I felt like making that choice just to continue that as he was growing and getting older. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for me the way that I thought, but that's why I chose. I actually exclusively pumped. I decided not to breastfeed. I wanted my husband to be able to feed the baby and our family to feed the baby. So that's why I chose to pump, and provide breast milk. So
yeah, that's so wonderful. Totally messed up in that I was supposed to say at the beginning of this conversation that we support all feeding journeys. So whether you in the audience, chest fed, breastfed, tube fed, formula fed, pumped, or a combination of all of those, PSI supports you and loves you, and you are enough, and you provided for your child. And so that's why we're all here to talk about it today, because any stigma that's surrounding it needs to go away. Any guilt that we felt, we want to let go of, because we fed our children, and that's all that matters. Charlotte, can you tell us why you chose to pump?
Yeah, so with my two kids, I chose to pump because thankfully I did have the option to take off a few months of maternity leave from my um, therapy work, but I wanted to go back. And this was
Yeah.
pre-COVID, so it was in office. And if I was going to be away from the kids all day, I had to pump. So I did that, and I did a combination of also um, breastfeeding and then had like the silicone manual pump on the other side at the same time. So I was trying to pump and feed at the same
Wow.
time. But then for the surrogacy, I chose to exclusively pump because obviously I didn't have a baby come home with me.
Mhm.
And I donated to a milk bank and to other local babies and all that stuff. So it was a great experience to be able to do that.
That is so wonderful. Thank you. Courtney, why did you choose to pump?
I chose to pump so that way my husband and my older son could share the experience. And also, I had a lot of breastfeeding challenges with my youngest son being able to latch. He had a tight jaw, so it was just really difficult to get him to breastfeed. So we switched. So I just exclusively pump.
Yeah, thank you so much. Liz?
I initially didn't want to pump at first, but my plan was to do that later down the line since I had a full-time job.
Mhm.
But by surprise, my daughter was born with a cleft palate. So
Mm.
she had a hole in the roof of her mouth, which she
Mhm.
did not have the ability to do the sucking mechanism.
Mhm.
So I actually ended up exclusively pumping for about 3.5 months, but it did contribute to my postpartum anxiety and psychosis. So I did
Mhm.
stop cold turkey.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I had postpartum anxiety and depression, and probably perinatal, prenatal anxiety as well. Just didn't recognize it. And so, right off the bat, even like coming home from the hospital, I was in pretty rough shape and starting to sleep less and less and have more and more anxiety. And so, I mentioned my one daughter was in the NICU, and I remember a NICU nurse telling me to just stop breastfeeding and just pump so I could get more sleep and others could help me. And so I did that for about 2 weeks, but I continued to decline mentally. And so I did at 2 weeks end up switching fully to formula. And that second hormone shift of weaning really was not good. So it's fascinating, all our different experiences and links and just just the commonalities too. Breastfeeding and doing it perfectly can contribute to PMADS, and weaning can contribute to PMADS. And we know all the beautiful, wonderful benefits of breastfeeding, but it's everyone has to do what's best for them and their mental health. And mom or the birthing person's mental health is way more important than whether it's breast milk or not breast milk. But anyway, it's exciting to hear all these experiences. Thank you. Erin, why did you choose to pump?
I chose to pump because when I had my first daughter, I just had so much anxiety with breastfeeding. I put so much pressure on myself to like make it work. And, and I was pumping with her just because I knew I was going back to work eventually. And I just wanted to be able to pump, but it was an excruciatingly anxiety provoking time. So when I had my second, I was willing to try breastfeeding, but right away, she also actually had a tight jaw, I think similar to what Courtney had said about her son. So she just could not latch. So I exclusively pumped. And it also helped because she was also born very small. So I could see how much she was getting, and which, maybe fed also into like just a little bit of like the anxiety there of like constantly like, watching the pump, watching the ounces. So ironically, when I got pregnant with my third, with my son, I said, I'm just going straight to formula. I'm not even going to try pumping, breastfeeding. And he wouldn't take a bottle and would only breastfeed. So I was like, okay, the joke's on me. But at least, with the pumping, it was a way, and I did it for about 6 months with my second and exclusively pumping. I don't think people give enough credit to how much work it actually is, because it's the amount of pumping, then feeding, and then everything starts all over again. So at 6 months, I was like, I'm done. So.
Oh yeah, I resonate with a couple things you just said. I mean, we all have our plans, right? So my plan was to do double football hold. And I had this twin breastfeeding pillow, and I was going to do the thing and did the breastfeeding class, and I was like amped up, and I was really looking forward to it. And my plan was, I was blessed enough to be able to have maternity leave for 4 months. My plan was to breastfeed for 4 months. But of course, the hospital had me pumping at the same time. And with twins, you literally are feeding them for 2 hours, and then you get maybe 1 hour off, 24 hours a day. So naturally, or just maybe this, not everyone has this experience, but for me, that contributed to everything. But yeah, we all have plans, and they don't always go according to plan. And a lot of us that experience PMAD, because we tend to be type A, kind of high strung personality. So it's always like this perfect storm, right? But okay, I think we're ready for our next question.
Yeah, before we jump into that, it is like a combination of kind of where your expectations are before you jumping into that journey, and then just living, not really having enough time to kind of settle into where you are currently, right? Everything's fast paced, and my boys were in the NICU, and I didn't get to start even trying or attempting to breastfeed because of my protocol. And then we weren't able to take them out of their incubators. And so I had to jump into them. And pumping for twins at the moment of which you're released from the hospital is stressful. And then when they come home at different times, it's like I had no recollection of how's this going to work? Is my body actually producing enough? And I was like strict on the, I have to stay up because I got off schedule, and now I had to make up for what I lost. And, that kind of wound me down. But what are some of the hardest parts of pumping for you guys? Like, what are those experiences for you? Michelle, do you want to go first this time?
Who did you just call on? Because we have a little feedback.
Michelle, do you want to go first?
Okay, perfect.
Sure. I'm one of those people who I can either support either way. I had a couple of girlfriends have children after me, and when they were going through the same thing, I was saying, I'll support you in stopping pumping, or I'll support you in continuing pumping. But which way do you want me to go? Because there's so many pros and cons to it. So one of the most difficult things, it was, I had an issue. So I strictly had postpartum depression, but I noticed and it was very similar to what all of you were saying, where as soon as I came home from the hospital, I knew something was wrong. I experienced that dysphoric milk ejection reflex, which is called DMER. And I would be pumping, and immediately I would have this flood of negative emotions. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm doing something so great for my son, but why am I feeling this way? And I was so gung-ho about it. I had my wireless pump, and I'm doing the dishes and everything. And then I would just be this flood of tears. And then I think just, you have to clean the pumps. And there was a big learning curve that I had. I thought I was just going to pump and do it every 2 hours and freeze these milk. I didn't know that there's fore milk and hind milk, and the quality of your milk can vary. So those were the challenges that I had.
Yeah, there's just so much you don't know until you know. And you only have so much bandwidth emotionally and mentally when you're pregnant to even research all the things. It's a lot to handle. Corey, did you want to call on someone else? Okay, cool.
Sorry. Liz, I'd really like to hear your perspective. By the way, getting to know you guys for the first time is just really awesome to hear and touch point on.
Yes.
Thank you. I think the most challenging for me, to be honest, is I think I put too much pressure on myself to get a certain amount of volume and succeed in a certain way that I thought to me was what I had to do for my kid, who A, was in the NICU, B, I was thinking I'm her only source of nutrition. but clearly that's not the case, right? So for me, it was doing it every single 2 hours. I was like on point, and then I wasn't really sleeping well. So that was contributing to everything else going on. And I think by nature, me being in the operating room, I was so used to everything being so sterile and so clean, and it like fed into my like anxieties of I've got to sterilize it every single time and wash it every single time, and it was a challenging cycle because I was also in the middle of COVID. So add all those things into it. The challenge for me was just every 2 hours, sterilize, clean it, sleep very little, and then do it all again 24/7.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that too, because with twins, it's like you feel like you have to provide twice as much and you're like obsessing about the time. Like I remember some provider like telling me to like, make notes and keep track of times, and my husband goes, no, she's already doing that too much. Like, don't encourage her, because I was absolutely obsessed with timing and germs. I definitely became a germaphobe postpartum, so I can relate to that a lot.
I can remember in the NICU, because you had brought up the sterilizing. I don't know if you guys.
You have to scrub.
And then the bags, like you had to put the parts in the bags. And I was like, please bring my parts back in time so that I can start the next feed, so I don't have to go track somebody down. But yeah, that's some of these you guys are bringing up. Courtney, do you want to share?
Yes. So when, like, within a month, when my son came home, my youngest, my pump decided to stop working. So just dealing with that was really hard. I didn't know that. I called the hospital lactation consultant, and they told me, oh, you can come and get one. So that was very, so I didn't have a backup. And so that was probably one of the hardest. And then really trying to like plan like my pumping schedules around like everything else, and learning how to use my pump to get the most amount.
Yeah, those are hard.
I have to ask you a minute. Did anybody get frustrated because you didn't have the the pump where you could just go, or because you had one pump in the hospital and it was like super efficient when at home? It's just like not bringing about the same volume. Did anybody have that experience?
I just had my one pump. Fortunately, my insurance covered it. And it was really good. This is obviously almost 10 years ago. It was really good, but it definitely was not cordless at all. Definitely felt like a cow. Definitely, and we'll talk about this later, but my pump was definitely talking to me. I was obsessing about the ounces and everything. I think the pump did an excellent job, but yeah, everything's new, right? Like the feelings or lack thereof, or just all the different feelings of being a new mom, being a new parent. Plus you're having to learn how to feed. Plus you're having to learn how to care for your infant or two infants, and Corey in my case. Yeah. And you're worried about everything. You're not getting enough sleep. A lot of us had intrusive thoughts, or, PMADs came on really fast. So there's just so many challenges all at once. But I don't really know. Did I get off track? I don't know if I answered your question, Corey.
I sort of use the plug-in pump as an excuse. So I would, okay, it's been 2 hours. I'm going to have to go by myself and be separate and pump. And then when our Bed Bath & Beyond closed, I got a wireless pump for super discount. And that's when it was nice, because I was able to be outside, or like I said, do the dishes, do other things. But yeah, I saw a difference in the power of both pumps.
Right.
Oh my gosh, cool. Hey, as an aside, I just found out Bed Bath & Beyond still exists online. So I was always a huge fan too. So I just found that out last week. Had to share.
Okay. I just had to ask because it was a curiosity in my brain, but let's get back on track. Charlotte, do you want to answer what was the
the hardest part of pumping? Yeah.
Yeah, so the hardest part I think for me, especially with my own kids, was I knew next to nothing about what actually went into pumping, and it was just I would much rather just nurse my kids, and if they weren't around, I remember just being frustrated with, "Oh, I have to use this thing. I have to pump. I didn't want to." But I learned so much more about pumping when I had to exclusively pump because I didn't have a baby to nurse after the first surrogacy journey. But yeah, I think keeping up with it, cleaning, sterilizing, especially donating to a milk bank, you have to sterilize after every
Yeah.
pump. Like you don't get a choice.
Mhm.
And then like just knowing what size parts to order for your body, that was so hard. And
Mhm.
I actually, for this one, because I'm prepping now, trying to figure out what pump I want to get for this journey, I ordered one of the nipple sizers online so I can make sure I get the right
That's
part.
awesome.
Yeah.
Every year they come up with like more and more stuff, for new parents. And some of it, you don't really need, but a lot of it has really improved in the last decade. So I'm kind of jealous, honestly. That's amazing. I don't know if they even had that 10 years ago.
I always say that to my mother-in-law. I say every problem that you had when you were raising your now 36-year-old son, there's
Yeah,
a solution for
that's
today.
awesome. We're thankful.
So true. Erin, would you like to answer?
Sure. I think the hardest thing for me, along with like what everybody else has said, is sort of just like that obsession over like how much I was producing. I would like drive myself crazy if like one pumping session was like a few ounces or not even ounces, like milliliters less than the prior. I'd be like, oh my God, my supply is dropping, and like do all
Right.
the crazy things to try to like get it back up, even though it hadn't, really dropped at all. And I think for me, with 8 years ago, like the wireless pumps were not a thing yet. So I just
Right.
felt like such a prisoner like to my pump, and then essentially like my house. I had my daughter, my second one, in the spring, so I was like, this is great, I'll be able to go outside, because my older one was born in December, and like it was
Mhm.
very isolating in the winter, obviously. So but then being tied to like a pump and an outlet, I felt like every 2 hours was just really, really difficult and isolating. I did end up getting a hospital grade pump because at the time I was working inpatient in like women's and children's at a hospital. So they were like, here, take this if you're going to pump exclusively. So that helped a lot because the power like behind that, as far versus like the pack one I had, like was just
Mhm.
different. But I just found, for me, I just felt like I missed out like on a lot of like trying to enjoy the postpartum period, then also like having an older one and stuff, because I felt like all I was ever doing was pumping around the clock. So it was a struggle a little bit, but
Yeah. I mean, I only pumped those 2 weeks, but during that time, I was holding my girls less and other people were holding them more. And since I was obsessed about producing, like we've all talked about, I mean, like my twin milk supply came in quick, and it like, the lactation consultant in the hospital was so impressed, and I was very committed, but that very thing led to lack of sleep and contributed to my PMADs. But I remember freaking out because not because of the pump, but it's related. My bottles, I forget what brand they were, but they're from the UK, and their sizing is different for nipples in the UK than here. And so I think their size, like America's size 0 was their size 1. And so I thought I was like prepared and had all the gear, before the girls came home, but I hadn't read all the directions. And in that hypervigilant, anxious, tired state, when I realized that we had nipple 1 and I thought it was too big and too fast flow, not slow enough for newborns, I flipped out. And I mean, everyone heard about it. My in-laws, my husband, my parents, the nurses at the hospital. And so they ended up giving me these like, the little NICU bottles. And just sent me home with like a whole bag of them because I was flipping out because I didn't think I had the right nipple. Turned out I did have a slow flow newborn nipple, but it's just amazing like how in that anxious state, everything becomes end of the world, crisis, because you just don't have the emotional energy to handle it. Corey, did you already share what the hardest part was for you?
Yeah, I did at the beginning,
Okay.
but I did not talk
Thanks.
on camera, so I wanted to make sure to leave space for you.
Yes.
You just called me. I couldn't hear.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so all of the above applies to me. So time consuming, so many different factors that you have to figure out. And it seems like a lot of conflicting information about how to get your supply up. You need to do the middle of the night. You need to sleep. You need to stop stressing. You need to eat well. You need to do this. You need to do that. And like all of those things felt so overwhelming to me. And at one point, I did decide, like, I'm going to pick what strategy I'm going to focus on and forget about the rest and hope that my stress levels decrease. But I mean, I can laugh about it now, but when I was trying to figure out all the things, I remember looking in my refrigerator, seeing almond milk, oat milk, skim milk, my milk, and having so much resentment and anger and emotions and thoughts come up there, because the hardest part for me was the level of disconnection. I felt like the only relationship I had was with my pump. And I didn't feel like, I felt like a shell of a human. I didn't feel connected to myself. I didn't feel connected to my child, my husband. I felt no joy in life. I didn't resent or regret becoming a mom, but I had absolutely no idea how challenging it was going to be to feed my child. I know I said that earlier, but like I left the hospital not being able to nurse my child. And like and this is coming from someone who was never against formula. I was open to however I fed my child. I still had really hard feelings because I failed. And lactation is not an equal opportunity employer. Like, men's nipples are useless. Like, I was upset with all of the things. But like now I can laugh about it, and now like I feel connected and I feel grateful for my journey, but it was not the case when I was in the weeds.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I think I'm going to go backwards and start with Erin. So we've talked a lot about the negatives and the causes and effects, around pumping, but let's talk about some of the positive. Erin, what was the best part of pumping for you?
I think the best part of pumping for me was the fact that other people could help feed the baby. Especially like those middle of the night feedings, like we talked about, like if you're getting up in the middle of the night to pump and then to have to feed, it would become like early on, I felt like I was the only one like who was doing it. And partly because of like my own anxiety, that I was like, well, I'd be nursing this like during this period, so let me do it all. But I think you realize it's almost like a 4-hour ordeal sometimes by the time you do it all, feed, like wash everything. So I think being able to have the help. And then I think just for me with like my kind of type A personality and anxiety, knowing exactly how much my daughters were getting at each feed. So that was also like, that was a blessing and a curse at the same time in a way. But I think knowing like, okay, like she's crying, there's no way she could be hungry because she just had a certain number of ounces. So let me try to figure what else might be going on. So that was helpful.
Yeah. If you've ever seen Call the Midwife, I loved how the midwives would have that scale, and they would like put the newborn on the scale and be able to say, oh, your baby's already gained half a pound. Congratulations. Like if we all had that, like, I think it would have helped so much. And
so funny story.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're
with
fine.
my first, when I was only breastfeeding, I was like, and again, she was very underweight. So I was weight checks every week. I actually was begging the lactation consultant to let me buy her scale off of her. Like, cause I had somebody come to my house. So she like brought the scale with her, and they weigh before and then you feed and they weigh after. And I was like, please just let me buy it. I'll give you any amount of money. Just so I knew like at that point, like she's getting something and I'm doing something right. But so yeah, there's definitely, so I think for me, knowing exactly how many ounces like each feed they were getting was helpful.
That totally makes sense. Liz, what was the best part for you?
It resonated with me, the whole having someone else help out with feeding. And the big thing was, because I didn't have that connection I initially thought I would with breastfeeding, I was like, okay, great. At least I'm like giving her something that came from me, which was awesome. I actually ended up pumping a lot of milk. She, at 3.5 months, just wanted to go to formula. And coincidentally, it's like when I needed to stop pumping. But I still had such an oversupply. I felt very lucky that I was also able to donate a lot of that. We bought an extra freezer just to store all this
Wow.
milk that I made.
Yeah.
And then it was just kind of cool. It's like, okay, I can also help other moms and families who also needed it too. So it's rewarding in its own sense.
Yeah, that's a huge blessing. Congrats. Courtney, what was the best part for you?
The best part was so that way my husband could help and we could do the bottle feeding. And it was alternative for me was breastfeeding. Both of my boys wasn't an option. With my oldest due to PMED, I wasn't able to pump more than probably 2 or 3 weeks. And the other thing is I also was able to donate about 1,000 ounces to the milk bank in between
Oh my
local
gosh.
a local mom as well. So that was very rewarding.
Yeah. Congrats. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Charlotte?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that's been said. Just having that extra help with feeding the baby, but then donation as well.
Mhm.
I mean, with the surrogacy stuff, it was really cool to see how many people actually benefited from it. But I really, with my two, I associated other people being able to feed them and me pump elsewhere as a sense of freedom. When I was actually pumping, it didn't feel very freeing because we didn't have, I didn't have the hands free either with my kids. This last time I did, that was nice.
Wow.
But yeah, so just that sense of freedom and hey, I still get to be a person too. I'm not just mom. So.
Great. Michelle?
For me, it was definitely the control. Like I had mentioned, I was so adamant about the things and so did all the research about what I was putting into my body during pregnancy. To be able to do the same thing and know exactly what my son was getting while I was exclusively pumping and getting to monitor how much he was taking in. When I had him, this was during the massive formula recall, and
I'm so sorry.
so difficult to find. But it was so I put so much pressure on myself to say, okay, I have to make sure that I keep my supply up because if I can't get the formula, what else am I supposed to do? So, but that was the benefit, was knowing that exactly what he was getting and that you can't recall them.
True. Jana?
Again, all of the above, support and knowing what he was getting. But I'd also say, because I'm a psychologist, I am now much more well-informed about, it's not as simple as breast is best and formula is best. I am much more well-educated and like I am striving to focus on breastfeeding, grief and guilt and shame and all of those things. And I have a lot of ideas that I'm hoping to put into play to help other women, because when I was in the hospital, or even before I was in the hospital, all of the paperwork was on just breastfeeding. There was nothing about pumping, nothing about formula, nothing about any of that. And like when I left the hospital, not being able to nurse my son, like I thought it was me. I thought I'm the deficient one, and if I had this information, if I knew, like that would have huge things for me emotionally.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Corey, what was the best part for you?
Yeah, it is hard to pinpoint the good. Sometimes when it all feels really heavy, saturated with negative association. But I will say it was a blessing to rely on a NICU nurse for my babies when I wasn't there, and when I had to come home and take care of my other kids. The only thing I had to worry about was that transitioning. Like, do you have enough milk to last half of the day? I can get everything done here and then bring you the night, and then have the time that I'm spending, because I couldn't be there all day. As a single mom, I had to go back and forth and run around. So, yeah, having that dependency for other people to be able to feed. So, you guys have like I'm just loving this because there's so many different experiences that I wouldn't have even thought about because I'm so
Right.
in the zone of my own story. If you did breastfeed or chest feed, did you grieve stopping though? And then also kind of like what resources helped during that time? Let's start with Janet. Do you want to start this time?
So, my experience, I only could nurse my son for one day. And because prior to that, I just couldn't get him to successfully latch. And so, like, I grieved the experience of not being able to get my son to latch, not being able to nurse. And then when I finally did, that was the experience I was looking for. I was it total bliss. Like, I felt so connected to my son and so happy that I finally did it. And then I couldn't do it again. And I was still in the midst of feeling like a shell of a human, feeling not connected. So, like, to have that one moment where I felt the most connected to be taken away from me, I grieved that. And then I also grieved. So, like, at one point, I stopped trying to learn how to nurse because it was too much. It was too much figuring out pumping, formula, and nursing. Fast forward to 10, 11 months, my supply plummeted for no reason that I could identify. I grieved that as well. Right now, I'm in acceptance of how my journey went, but there were definite triggers that made me grieve and feel that sense of loss and shame and all the things.
Thank you so much for sharing. Michelle, do you want to go next?
So hopefully this is a breath of fresh air for some people, but I didn't grieve it at all. When I was done, I was done. That was it. I think I pumped probably for about, I want to say about 2 months. And when I was diagnosed with the postpartum depression, it was really at the peak of my lowest point. And it became more of what can I do to get myself right before before it really escalates to some uncontrollable. So I said, first thing I'm going to do is stop pumping. And I took that out of the equation, and I was able to work with my doctors and my support team, PSI, the only organization that could really help me. And that was it. It was done. It's done. I never looked back. I knew that, the formula of shortage was coming back a little bit better. And that was it. He was getting fed, and I saw him thriving, and I was happy.
That is so important, though, that you held that space for everyone listening, because just as Em had said at the top of this whole hour, is that we're holding space for all different journeys, and sometimes it's a celebration, right, to come out of that. But what's important, I think, Jenny, you kind of touched on this, is that it's not just feeding your child. It's also taking into the equation how it's impacting you. Liz, would you like to go?
You calling me? Okay, I was making sure. Michelle, I'm so glad you said that, because I was like, thank the Lord, because granted, at the time, my family and my providers saw my symptoms of psychosis becoming really apparent, and knowing that the lack of sleep, mainly because of a lot of pumping, contributed to it. My OB was like, just stop pumping cold turkey. I mean, for a minute, I was worried of like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Will I get engorged? Will it hurt? What will it be like? And she was like, stick a sports bra. This is not medical advice. She's like, stick a sports bra on and, go with it and just monitor. But I got protected sleep. It was like the beginning of my journey for healing. And I still had all this extra milk. And luckily, my kid wanted to go to formula. So I didn't really grieve it at all, because it gave me this sense of like just a ton of weight being lifted. So thank you for sharing and helping me not feel alone, that it's okay to not grieve that.
Absolutely. Jana, did you want to tag back on and share what were some of kind of the resources that you had found helpful?
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. So yes, while I grieved, I also had some of those uplifting experiences as well, because eventually I did decide I want to focus on emotional nourishment of myself. And part of the things that had helped me was I went to a support group nearby. I used PSI. I saw all the different stories of different women, and I didn't feel so alone. And I'll be honest, like I followed a Facebook page that gave different pointers, and I decided that's not helping me. So I'm going to go off of that because like it was actually causing me to feel more deficient. So like I think all the information out there, all the support services out there, and the fact that I knew that I did my best to feed my son, and my husband kind of gave me permission to quit whenever I felt like I wanted to, like all of those things helped me get to that place of acceptance and a healthy emotional state.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you guys can hear that. Sorry. Okay. Sometimes we get the most interesting background sounds. Courtney, do you want to answer the question? If you were able to breastfeed or test feed, was there anything that you grieved, or how did you grieve? And then what are the resources that were helpful to you?
With my first son, that will be 7 in June. I guess then my mindset was like breastfeed is best and like nothing else, I guess. So I grieved quite a bit, and I think a lot of that, like a lot of that feedback that I was giving myself led to a lot of my PMADs, and I didn't know then about PSI, and so my therapist is the person that got me through the grieving process. And with my son, they'll be a year old now. I just see it as enjoying my journey, and where I just came a long ways with, okay, so I can't breastfeed. We tried everything we could to make it happen, but I am still able to feed my baby breast milk.
Thank you for sharing.
And sorry. And also this time around, I talked to like the specialists through like the support coordinators, breastfeeding specialists as well. So that helped a lot.
Yeah, they are very helpful, aren't they? Courtney, I used to volunteer in that program as well. And that is one of I love just being able to, how PSI plugs in people who have already gone through what you're going through. There's no needing to sift through background. Like it's just like a natural understanding of, yeah, I totally get that. That sucks. Or, just holding that space. So I'm glad you're able to utilize that as a resource. Charlotte?
Yeah, so with my first one, I definitely grieved stopping because she self-weaned at 10 months. And I really had that goal because we're kind of told, oh, you have to make it to a year, right? You have to for, breastfeeding or pumping or whatever. And since I had gone back to work and I was pumping and she was getting, fed through a bottle a lot of the time, it was so fast flowing that when she went to then breastfeed, it wasn't. And so she just started feeding less and less, which meant my supply dropped. And I didn't know enough about pumping at the time to actually keep my supply up, which is crazy to think about now because, once you know, right? And so thankfully I was an over supplier, and so I had been able to keep up. But the first 3 months were extremely painful. Nobody told me she had a tongue tie. And because I was an oversupplier, I was okay. Whereas other people would have recognized sooner that there was more of an issue. And so it wasn't until her mouth grew enough to where it wasn't painful anymore. And so for 7 months, it was great. And then 10 months hit, and I was like, okay. But then with my second, I did not grieve at all. So I was just like a couple of you others, where once I hit that year mark, I was like, I am done. I want to look into surrogacy and do other things. And you can't start that until you're not producing milk yourself. And so yeah, I was ready to be done that time. And then same for when I was exclusively pumping as well. I didn't grieve that because I wanted to start another journey, so I had to stop again to follow through for that. But wise for me, I didn't have a lot of resources, I don't think, with my first two. I wish I had had access to more or had known about more. But I was part of an exclusively pumping surrogates group on Facebook that actually taught me so much, which is crazy to think because some people don't really find help in Facebook groups because it can get kind of off topic and whatnot. But yeah, that was my main source of information.
Awesome. Yeah, we when it comes to support, you'll take, sometimes it's just like, give me something. Like, I just need something. I need something to attach to. And then you start to recognize, yeah, this is not enough, or, I need to go pivot in a different direction. So I'm glad that you're able to utilize that. Erin?
I think what other people have said, I did not really grieve it at all. I think I grieved the idea of what my breastfeeding and postpartum journey would look like, especially with my first, because you know no different. So you're like, oh, I have all the plans in place, and why wouldn't it go that way? So I think I felt this huge sense of like kind of just relief and just a weight lifted, like when I finally felt like I gave myself the permission, because all I wanted was somebody to tell me it's okay to stop, and I didn't get that. So it eventually came internally from me. So I think I like grieved what looking back now, and like it feels so long ago because my oldest is 11. I was like, I don't even remember. I know it was a hot mess, but I don't remember much more than that. But I think for me, I was grieving just like what I kind of set myself up to think it was going to be. And then similarly with exclusively pumping, I was ready, just because trying to pump throughout the day at work and stuff and keep that up was just not easy. And I think with my son, I grieved a little bit more because I felt like I had a little bit more of an experience that I was hoping for at some point. But again, that was like, I had no intention of breastfeeding whatsoever, but I was like, he's got to eat it. He literally was not eating it. So I was like, this is so backwards. And I think what I grieved like a little bit, I knew like he was my last. So I was like, all right, this is it. Like, it was not what I ever thought it would have been, but I definitely was relieved and just more than happy to stop when I did at that point. And as far as resources, I think I just sort of, like Corey, what you said, just hung on to anything. There was no like specific official resources that I like had that really helped. I think I was like part of the Facebook groups and all these other things that I just kind of that was about it.
Awesome. There was going to be something that I was going to say. My brain does this, everyone. Em knows this all too well.
It happens to all of us. Yes.
Did you
Sorry, I do. Sorry, there's background. I don't think I've told the audience. My daughters decided today it was the perfect time to have friends over and get ready for a tea party. So that's going on in the background. For me, there was a lot of grieving. My PMADs were very severe and started really quickly, but because I stopped pumping, I was able to get on really good medicine and heal quickly. And so by 6 weeks, I was myself and I was getting enough sleep and things were a lot better. So that is similar and different from a lot of your stories. But having one daughter in the NICU, I didn't get to put her to my chest very much. I think I only remember twice while she was in the NICU. And my other daughter, baby B, as we called her, she, that first week I did, obviously get to attempt to breastfeed her around the clock, but I was also pumping. And so I don't know. I justified it. I told myself I was doing the right thing and able to get the right help, and that I'd gotten the right medicine and heal quickly from my perinatal anxiety and depression. The resources, fortunately, I had a friend who was familiar with PSI. She's also a friend of my parents, and so she provided us with the list of support groups because almost 10 years ago it was only in person. A weekly in-person support group didn't feel like enough at the time, because I was continuing to deteriorate mentally each day. And so I ended up going inpatient for 48 hours, as well as staying with my parents for 2 weeks while I healed. And fortunately, they just lived 2 miles from us. So I came home and held the girls and helped feed them and take care of them, and basically gained confidence, because to me, it felt like the hardest thing in the world to take care of them and feed them around the clock and do all the things. And so it was just, like many of you, it was a perfect storm of situations and psychology and all the things that contributed. But I thought, I told people, almost proudly, like, yeah, I breastfed and pumped for 2 weeks. And I like to encourage women, whether they did it for 1 day or 3 years or formula fed the whole time, like, you did an amazing job. Just a second. Girls, can you quiet down? Live on Facebook. What can you do? And I told people, like, I'm proud that I switched to formula, because in my case, I was able to get the help I needed. And I had a psychiatrist, and I was seeing my therapist twice a week, and just having to spend a lot of time, healing with medicine and therapy. But I guess it was about a year ago, PSI was soft launching the postpartum planning class, and before they ended up going live with it to the public, and I participated as a pretend guest who was expecting twins, and I ended up getting really emotional when they talked about breastfeeding and chest feeding. Like, I didn't expect that. Like, I thought all these years later I was over it and that I had healed, but I think knowing that I was only ever having these girls and they were my first and last and only children, it's hard. Like, I didn't get to experience breastfeeding both of them. And I did have so few experiences breastfeeding. But at the end of the day, like, it was such a blessing to have my husband help me bottle feed and formula feed them. And, whether you're pumping or feeding by formula, like, you spend just as much time with your kids, right? Like, every 3 hours around the clock for months and months and months. And, they've already proven that's a full-time job, like, just feeding your child that first year. So it ended up, being a blessing, and I was able to bond. So, but yeah, I am so thankful for all the resources that PSI has now, because they didn't necessarily have them back then. Like, I would have been calling the helpline, I would have been calling the hotline, I would have been on the online support groups. Like, it's just great what PSI has now. And I'm going to mute since this is getting loud.
I think everyone's gone, right? Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to do the next question, or do you? Okay, it's all right. All right. So I don't necessarily have experience with this, but we can kind of tweak it a little bit. Did anybody experience your pump talking to you? Or if not, that's fine. What did it say if it did? And if it didn't speak to you, was there something you wanted to say to your pump? Because like I shared with you guys earlier, there are times when maybe I just wanted to launch it across the room. So go ahead and and share with either of those. Erin?
Yeah, I think for me, like, I was trying to think back of, like, specific, was it like something specific? And I think at the time, yes, I do remember, like, things going through my mind of, like, what I felt like it was almost like mocking me at some points, especially in the middle of the night, like, those feedings. But I think what I noticed is, like, and I think too, when you're postpartum, you're so hyper vigilant, like, to noise and sounds. I remember it sounding like the loudest thing I had ever heard in my entire life. And actually, those smaller, like, backpack pumps, the motors on those are way louder like that than the hospital grade. So that alone was, like, a reason for me to get, like, the hospital grade the second time around. But I remember, like, wrapping my smaller pump up in like towels and blankets and like shoving it under pillows in the middle of the night because the noise, I just couldn't take it. And I was like, it has to be on if I'm going to want to get milk. So I've got to like, suffer through this. And I think Corey, like to your point, I think for me, I just wanted to like launch it like so many times where, it just like, I was so over it. So yeah.
Not prematurely though, because we did heavily depend on those.
Well, right, exactly. It's like as many times I want to take a hammer to it, I was like, but I can't because I need it. And then I'm and actually like with my first, like the insurance companies at that point were not covering pumps. So like I was like, I can't spend however much on another pump if I break this thing. So
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Charlotte, how about you?
Yeah, so I didn't hear it speak to me, nothing in particular, but just that sound and that kind of nuance of that consistent repetitive sound. I'm very sensitive to loud sounds or just noise in general as well, and I was definitely ready for it to be gone at certain points and to not have to deal with it. But like you both said, yeah, we really needed it. So
Yeah, I think Michelle has to hop off. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for being here and sharing your experiences. It means the world to us. And thank you for all your hard work as climb leaders as well. And anyone who needs to hop off can. And yeah, that I think only Aaron heard. I mean, I remember hearing my pump, but I don't remember what it said. So I think it was just Aaron and I. I thought everyone was going to have this experience, but it turns out not so much.
I thought so too. So
yeah,
like this is normal.
We talked about having all the solutions now. We need disposable pump parts because I'll say it again. Hated.
Yes.
Yeah, hated it.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for you guys joining and for all of those who are viewing. This has been a really important conversation. And I do want to take a moment to remind any of our listeners about the free resources here at PSI. If you're struggling with your mental health during your feeding journey, be sure to check out the website, postpartum.net, or call text to get connected with individualized help at 1-800-944-4773. And remember, if you're ever in need of emergent help, to call 988. And one more thing, because we don't talk about it enough. If you want to meet other parents in person who go through something similar or have gone through something similar, be sure to find the Climb on our website or email us at climb@postpartum.net. And just a general reminder for those from us here at PSI, you are not alone.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. You guys take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.